Good evening. We've been hearing the word disruption here quite a bit in the last few hours, and I don't know what I'm actually doing here because I don't think I'm actually very disruptive. And as a matter of fact, I think I'm actually the opposite of that, and I would find myself to be much more cooperative than disruptive. So it's odd being here, but thank you for having me here, and I'm going to show you how cooperative and how helpful I really am. So a couple of years ago, actually, what do I mean a couple of years ago? This was about late 2003. I developed this little gadget. It's a little tracking software. I'm an artist. I'm completely self-trained in technology. I only know what I need to know, and then I go and cause trouble with whatever that is. So what I did is, this is way before the days of Foursquare, way before the days of Facebook Places, or any of these other software that you could come up with. And what I did is I turned my old mobile phone into this tracking device that would let everyone know where I was, what I was doing, and every little details of, like, what I just ate and every place that I've been. So you can kind of see that there's a little flashing arrow, and that's where this arrow kind of makes sense. And I think some of you kind of recognize these little islands, where I'm somewhere with a little bit of someplace with lots of islands. You can go in a little further. So you may recognize this image from the top, which was literally right up front, right over here. So I'm in a city of some sort. There's a big road going this way. It's near some water. Let's go in a little further. Okay, it's even more of a larger city. And if you see, there's a road over here, and there's a building with a little bit of some sort of a construction site back there. And that's me right here. So that little 1 pixel over there. It's kind of odd looking at yourself as a pixel because we're still kind of getting used to it. In the past, you'd have to open the map and look and find where on the map, and you'd point to that map. And now we take out our smartphones, we hit this little button, and the map puts us in the middle, and it generates the map to your local position. So I think there's a huge shift that's taking place, and we're getting used to watching ourselves in the middle of the map rather than us being on the edge of the map. So I've decided to create this mapping tool, and also there's things like you can find out all sorts of little bits and details about me, like every flight that I've been on. So you can see that I was on this flight, Northwest 752, a couple of years ago from Minneapolis, and there's all the Minneapolis airports. By the way, this is running live off my server, so you can actually see it anytime. You can go anytime online to trackingtransients.net and track me, see what I'm doing and where I am and what I'm up to, in case I'm up to any no good or trouble. Well, what else do I share? I share all the meals that I've eaten. So you know that on this day I've had this meal, on this day I've had that. I've also eaten all sorts of little bits and pieces of this. My banking records are public. Let me zoom this up a little bit. So you know that on June 2nd of 2008, I spent $20.64 at Yum Yum Fish, San Francisco, $72 at the Gap in Menlo Park in Edison, New Jersey. There's tons of these things. And you also even know little bits and pieces like where I'm kind of doing my thing on May 11th in San Sebastian. You can see I've done that. This, by the way, is the Mombasa International Airport. There's all sorts of little bits and pieces. This is in a bus station in Lithuania. And then this, I really don't know what it is yet. I've been looking at this image forever, but I still can't figure this out. Okay, well, why would I be doing this? Why would anyone in their right mind want to tell everyone every little detail? And really, when I first started this project, I basically told this exact same thing to a lot of software companies. And they just looked at me like, this is creepy. There's no way we want to do this. Well, interestingly enough, of course, there's 800 million people now just on Facebook alone that's doing essentially the same thing. So it's actually become this normal. It's become what was this sort of wacky art project has really become this commonplace. And as an artist, I actually find it quite exciting, the fact that it's no longer art. Or at least that's how I've kind of looked at it over the years. So why did I do this? Well, a couple of years ago, it started right over here. Well, when I say a couple, I really mean almost 10 years ago now. In June of 2002, I was coming back from an exhibition, and it happened exactly where that arrow is pointing. That's the Detroit Metro Airport. And I was flying back from an exhibition overseas, and as I'm coming back in, I hand my passport over, and I get taken in by the FBI. Turns out that the FBI was interested in me as someone that could be possibly related to some terrorism activities. Yeah, supposedly I'm a shady character, but I don't think I'm that shady. Like I said, I'm perfectly normal, and I'm just like you. I don't go on causing trouble. I'm not disruptive at all. It's unlike some of you that want to be disruptive. I want to be cooperative. So when the FBI took me in and said, where are you? What are you doing? I was like, well, how can I help you? Instead of saying, how dare you accuse me, my immediate reaction was, what can I do for you? How can I help you with this? Well, it's a much longer story than that, but basically what had happened is during this conversation, one of the questions that I was asked was, where were you September 12th? Now, when most of us get asked a random date, it's really difficult for us to remember, but fortunately, I had this PDA with me, and I pulled it out and said, well, let's look up September 12th. September 12th, I paid my storage bill, 10 to 10:30, met with one of my graduate students and taught a couple of classes. Where were you the 19th? Where were you the 18th? We read about 6 months of my calendar, every little detail of every little thing in it. And of course, I think the FBI agent that was with me, that was interrogating me, I don't think he was expecting me to have such detailed records of everything. Fortunately, I did, because it could be really bad otherwise. So the storage unit over here that I paid rent on the 12th at between 10 and 10:30. So this FBI agent asked me, what did you have in it? And by the way, that's this storage unit. It was this thing in here. He goes, what did you have in it? I was like, well, winter clothes and assorted junk and pack rat material, because I just have a lot of junk. And he looks at me and says, no explosives. So it turns out that the authorities had received a report that an Arab man was hoarding explosives and who fled on September 12th. And that Arab man would supposedly be me. Never mind, I'm not Arab. Never mind, I didn't have explosives. Never mind, it wasn't the 12th. But it doesn't matter. If you see something, say something, even if it's wrong. And it was this act that basically got me caught up with the FBI for the next 6 months. So this is in Tampa. I spent a lot of time there. I used to teach at the University of South Florida at the time, and going in here, this little building, I spent 6 months going back and forth between interviews. They would say, well, we have a couple of more questions for you. Can you come to the office? Sure, I got nothing to hide. I'll be right over there. And they'd ask me questions like, do you belong to any groups that wish to harm the United States? Or have you ever witnessed or participated in any act that may be detrimental to the United States or a foreign nation? Some bizarre questions. Anyway, at the end of 9 months, I basically had, at the end of 6 months, after undergoing 9 consecutive polygraphs, or lie detector exams, the FBI said I was okay. I was like, yeah, I know I'm okay. This is what I've been trying to tell you guys all along. Of course, anyone that talks to me for more than a couple of minutes realizes I'm not a terrorist threat. And the very first FBI agent that interrogated me, he knew right away I was completely harmless. But the problem is that the system doesn't trust itself. And because the system doesn't trust itself, he was not able to make that decision, say, the guy's harmless, leave him alone. But it had to go through a full cycle, and it kept going and going and going. So it becomes a little bit of a problem. So, but instead of actually fearing these guys, I decided, well, let me help you. It's actually quite a counterintuitive thing now that I think about it, because at the situation when it's happening and you're sitting face to face across the table from someone who essentially decides life or death, you don't behave like a rational human being, and you revert to very animalistic instincts. And in my case, in the case of the animal, you do whatever you have to do to survive. And in my case, survival meant cooperate. So I told them every little detail. So what you just saw earlier is what I've actually shared with the FBI. So I've decided to tell them every little bit of everything, and not just tell the FBI, but I've also decided to tell you. And by communicating openly with the FBI, all the information that the FBI has on my file is completely valueless because everyone has this information. We're all generating so much information about all of us that at a certain time, it's no longer about information gathering. It's really about analyzing what part of that information is important and what part of it is not. And in my case, I put out so much noise that it's actually camouflaging, and I actually live an incredibly private life. You know very little about me, even though you have every evidence of every place that I've ever been every few seconds. Everything is out there. My entire life is open. But so what is it? I mean, is this is this something that I would recommend that everyone do? So, if you get stopped by the FBI or any other agency of that sort, that just give everything up. But really, in my case, that's what worked. I think because if I showed aggression, if I showed hostility, I knew it could have gotten pretty bad. I knew, at any moment they could have said, we're taking you to wherever we're taking you. We don't have to tell you where we're taking you or why we're taking you. So it gets pretty scary in that situation. And I think a lot of this is because, as an artist, you tend to think of things differently. I think, and being this artist that has a foot in the arts and a foot in the sciences, you kind of look at it as, well, and when I work with my science colleagues, it's almost as if, okay, we've identified the problem, we'll solve the problem, and then after we solve the problem, we move on to the next problem. And then after that, we move on to the next problem. Artists have this luxury where we can enter things from various directions, and we don't necessarily have to go the most efficient or the most direct. And in many cases, many of us, we solve that same problem over and over and over from various different directions. To really look at it from rather counterintuitive ways, look at it from opposite perspectives. And I think having this approach to creative problem solving allows a much broader range of explorations. Let me switch back to over here, and you can take a look at what's going on with this. Okay, so one of the things is that, so I think that there is a huge distinction between the way artists operate and the way scientists operate. And I think one of the things to also think about is the fact that because today with all the consumers and all the, for the first time, we actually have just as many producers of information and media as we have consumers of information. All of us have cameras with us at any given moment. Everything is there, and any moment we can turn that camera around. It's not a matter of fearing that surveillance camera. I mean, we're seeing what's happening all over these places. So I think one way to look at it is, if you look at what's happened throughout history, every time you have a traumatic event, such as warfare, there's always some type of a artistic reaction that takes place. When you look at the art created before World War I and what happened after World War I, there's a huge shift that takes place in the arts. World War II is a perfect example of what happens in terms of, abstract expressionism, I don't think could have existed without World War II. And in the same sense, what happens right now that we're on this perpetual war on terror? How does terror give up? Does that mean that the artistic challenges and the artistic reactions of what happens in society, does that change this? So one of the other things is, so again, because we're putting out so much information, we're all doing this. I'm not the only one that's putting out all these little bits and pieces. So you know that on August 16th at 10:22 a.m., I was in that parking lot in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, or landing at this airport near Salt Lake City. I mean, all these little bits and details, it's all out there. I mean, many of you are probably tweeting this very second as you're listening to this, and you may have 20, 30, 50, 80,000 tweets. So in this sense, it's no longer a matter of having the information, it's a matter of analyzing that information. What does that mean with that analysis? And I think a really crucial thing to keep in mind is that, as a culture, we've all started out as an agrarian society, and we've moved from that into a industrial society, and we've moved from there into this society where our economies are based on ephemera, on services, on information, things that do not tangibly exist. So we've made this evolution, but yet one of the things that we've never done is many of our intelligence agencies that are working with information are still stuck in this 1950s, 1960s model, particularly in the United States, where the culture of it is still this Cold War mentality against the Soviet Union. So what I'm really getting at is there's an evolution of ideas that are taking place. And I don't know what's going to happen soon, but I do know for sure that whatever's going to happen 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now is going to be drastically different than what we're used to. None of us could have predicted what's happening right now, particularly in the use of social media and such, 20 years ago. The system just did not allow us for us to even think about that. I mean, many of us, this is a complete shock how it came. Now, there are some of us that were in the know, and you probably, you can predict some ideas of what might happen. But in the case of trying to figure out what in a predictive moment, we really can't do that. But one of the things that we absolutely know for sure is that whatever happens is going to be different. It's not a matter of better or worse, but it's going to be different. And the way it's going to be different is the fact that we're going to have to learn to adapt. We're going to have to adapt our sets, because what's happening is you have three rates of change taking place. You have the technology moving at this blazing fast speed. Then you have the culture that's coming in a little slower right behind it, but nonetheless, we're very adaptive beings, and we do adapt to things. And then at the end, you have policy and systems that regulate us. And often they're so far behind everything that it doesn't, by the time it catches up, the technology and the culture has completely changed. That's a very crucial issue here. So I think one of the things to keep in mind is that we need to accelerate this pace. So and we've seen that if technology is here and culture is here, that gap between the technological breakthrough and the cultural acceptance is getting smaller and smaller on a daily basis. Unfortunately, in the case of policy, that's not the case. And it's really lagging behind drastically. So one of the things is that we need to look at this as an evolutionary process and in a creative process. And one of the things that I'm really interested in is talking about how we can change this. And I want to leave you with one tiny little bit. And is the fact that if we don't do this, we actually risk a very drastic shift. And many people here have talked today about taking chances, taking risks, being adaptable. But really, when you think about it, if you look at the scientific definition of extinction, it's a species that failed to adapt to changing conditions. And because that species did not adapt, it went away. The same thing happens to ideas. If we do not adapt and evolve our ideas, they will go away. So I'm going to leave it at that. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.